Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today. This is the third video in the medieval kitchen build. This time I will focus on the creation of the ceiling. For this build, instead of doing a plain ceiling, I opted to create a beamed one with wood. I think it will communicate the sensation of warmth and coziness a kitchen would have. So, let's begin. To create the wooden beams, I used two different types of circular wooden sticks. The thicker ones were around 1 centimeter in diameter, and the thinner ones were around 0.7 centimeters. The idea of using two different widths is to create a more visually dynamic structure to cover the whole ceiling. As a base for the wooden structure, I use XPS foam and cover it with popsicle stick pieces, similar to a wooden floor pattern. I traced some lines in the XPS foam with a fine liner as guiding lines when gluing the popsicle pieces over it. Since this will represent a rustic ceiling, I created this simple tool with some screws and masking tape to give some texture to the wooden structure by scratching it. Since the natural color of the popsicle sticks was too light, I decided to apply a wash with burnt sienna acrylic. Also, for the wooden beam pieces, I decided to give some color with burnt sienna, but darken it with a little bit of black acrylic. Once the base and beams were painted, I made a test on the positioning of the beams over the base and marked it with a fine liner the exact positions of each beam over the base. Also, I use a brush pen to mark the positions where I will put some accessories in the beams. which later in the diorama will support some hanging decorations from the beamed ceiling. For these accessories or hooks, I use some steel wire cut in little pieces and bended in the shape of a hook. I use white school glue to secure the hooks inserted in the beam's tiny hole. This particular part required some patience to bend the tiny wire pieces and insert them in the little holes. Once the hooks were secured and the glue dried, I proceeded to paint the wire pieces with enamel flat black. To put the structure together before gluing it to the base, I use a sheet of paper as a size reference and glue the beams to it. I did this because I needed the structure finished so I could attach some decorative cords on every intersection of the beams, which would have been very difficult once the beams were glued to the base. I marked the beams on one of the sides so it would be easier to identify the upper side from the lower one. Once the glue dried completely and the structure was firm, I proceeded to take away the paper sheet, leaving only the structure and ready to do some detailing on it. As details, I added some Ixtle cords, which is a natural fiber material and easy to find in any hardware store in Mexico. I wrapped some pieces of it around the intersections of the beams. And secured the nuts with white school glue cutting the excess cord pieces once the glue had dried. As final touch for the structure, I weathered it with an acrylic black wash to give it an old and worn out look. Also, I did the same wash to the XPS base to darken a little more the wooden sticks cover. Sometimes errors can happen in the execution of a build. In this one, it is still noticeable the white glue remains in vertical lines where I had already put the wooden beams before the cords. So I had to take them off to wrap the cords first. Finally, with the structure finished, I proceeded to glue it to the base. Thank you for watching. I hope you like this tutorial and it can be useful to your builds. For most of these builds, I am learning as I advance in the project. So it's common to make mistakes, as you could see when I had to take off the beams from the base so I could wrap the cords. So in order to avoid these kind of mistakes as much as I can, I try to plan ahead the procedures and materials I would use to get to a desired result. Anyway, sometimes the results are not as one imagined, but it sure is a rich learning experience for future projects. And most important, a very fun experience building it.